Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. Yo, it's game day, stadium packed, feel that rush. From Boise to App State, man, we never hush. Rocking the colors, yeah, we bleed that pride. Cinderella stories, watch our dreams collide. Late nights, bright lights, we grind every play. Underrated talent, we gon' make them say, who's that team when we come to town? Representing for the schools that wear the crown. We in the G5, high, buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. Yo, it's game day, stadium packed, feel that rush. From Boise to App State, man, we never hush. Rocking the colors, yeah, we bleed that pride. Cinderella stories, watch our dreams collide. Late nights, bright lights, we grind every play. Underrated talent, we gon' make them say, who's that team when we come to town? Representing for the schools that wear the crown. We in the G5, high, buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. We the ones they are. You ones they can't skip. Fighting for respect, it's a tough road ahead. But we pack that heart and we never dread. Late hits and big plays, we bring in the heat. Watch out for the G5, we can't be beat. From the MAC to the Sun Belt, we don't back down. In this football jungle, we wear the crown. All the doubters sleeping, but we making noise. In the G5 Hive, we the realest boys. When the clock's ticking down, we the ones to believe. One play, one chance, we gon' make them achieve. From the sidelines to the end zone, hear that roar. In the G5 Hive, we always wanting more. We in the G5 Hive, buzzing loud, we thrive. Underdogs rising up, taking shots, we alive. From the mountains to the coast, we gon' bring that fire. In the heart of college football, we the ones they admire. So raise your flags high, let them wave in the air. In the G5 Hive, we the squad that's rare. With heart and grit, we rewriting the script. In the world of college football, we the ones they can't skip. Yeah.
Here's Navarro on the run. Navarro's going to keep it. Navarro for 6! Touchdown, Bobcats!
I feel I had a hard time staying in my own lane.
Oh my goodness! Red Murdoch! Pick 6!
Harvath inside the 30, the 20. Blake Harvath will score!
And Mendoza takes a big hit. He never saw it coming. Trey White got in there.
There's his man, Rucker. And nobody's going to catch him. Goodbye.
Intercepted!
Tyree Skipper! Touchdown!
Telly again, why not? A step forward and make it 2 for Telly!
Quarterback keeper showing off the speed, steps on the gas, untouched!
The G5 Hive. All G5, all the time.
Welcome to the G5 Hive Live. We are excited to bring you G5 college football coverage you love each and every week. I'm Luke. I'm joined by my co-host, Justice. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're watching us on X, please give us a follow, a like, and a retweet. If you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. The G5 Hive merchandise store is now live. Link in the YouTube video comments as well as pinned on our X page at the bottom of the screen. Justice, we are back. Last conference to touch on here for coaching changes, people coming, people leaving. Whew, we did it. We've made it, and we've almost made it to our Worker Bee series. I don't know, galore, extravaganza. We were just talking here and there beforehand. boy, I forgot how much of a grueling job this is going to be again. But fun.
It's always a ton of work. I think that the hope is that this work is less work than last year, right? Like we can reuse some videos. We kind of have the format down as far as the questions. We just got just new names.
Yeah. First was definitely hard because you're making contacts and you're hoping people say yes. Because we were hoping last year to get, I think it was 20 or maybe 25, and that would have been great. And then we just kept going, and we got everybody. And
yeah, but then that creates pressure this year, right? Because last year we got everybody, so like we want to make sure we get everyone, get every team covered again. And then I don't know, like just probably my own self conscious, but like I almost feel like, well, if we don't get everybody again, then we failed. And that's not really true, but that's just kind of the way it feels. I don't know, but I think we'll get everybody. Like, we'll have to track down some new students and some new guests. But
the MAC,
I think
is
we'll
on
get
our radar.
Done.
Yeah, I think we will too. It always a great series. Learn a lot about the teams. So if you want to know more about the teams, be like Billy Tuesday. He says the Worker Bee series is great. I tend to agree, but a little biased.
Hopefully it's even better. Hopefully it's even better this year. If you have any suggestions for improvements, things you want to see that we didn't do last year, let us know. We're always open to suggestions, improvements. We did that series with the NIL and the house settlement with those two guests. That was the suggestion of a fan. Someone that supports us. So, and then the graphics we did last week and the ones we're doing tonight, that was someone saying, hey, it'd be great if you could put these names up on the screen. And so, yeah, we're always open to ideas, suggestions, improvements. While we agree the series is great, we want to make it better. So if you have ideas or thoughts on how you'd like or what you'd like to see to make that series better, let us know. We're all ears. You can send us a comment in the YouTube video, or even send us a DM. We've had folks send us DMs with suggestions as well, and we'd be happy to talk with you and improve and make the series better.
With that, what's the Swarm need to know? News and notes from around the league.
So we'll start off with some transfer portal stuff. Utah State was announced today. Utah State wide receiver Jack Histera is entering the transfer portal. I believe that the common destination is seen as Cal. Could be a potential big blow for Utah State. I think many viewed Jack as the potential wide receiver one or the top wide receiver for Utah State this coming year. Spring practice is just getting started, so we'll kind of see how that goes. But yeah, Jack Histera entering the transfer portal today. Coaching news: Bowling Green. Only last week I mentioned Scott Loeffler left, went to Philadelphia Eagles. I believe his quarterback's coach. They hired Eddie George, and there's only 4 coaches from Scott Loeffler's staff that currently remain at Bowling Green, and they are Brian White, running backs coach, Alex Bayer, strength and conditioning, as well as special teams coordinator and tight ends coach, Greg Nosel, co-OC and offensive line coach, and Derek Jackson, secondary coach. Bowling Green co-OC and play caller for the last 3 seasons, Max Warner, was not retained. So we'll be keeping an eye out to kind of see who Eddie George brings on board to kind of finish out that staff. Sticking with Bowling Green, as you might expect, they had some folks about. So when Loeffler left, there's a transfer portal window open for Bowling Green players, 30-day window, and we have another name that entered the portal from Bowling Green. That's quarterback Justin Lamson. He just gotten there from Stanford via the transfer portal. He's back in the portal. Be interesting to see if he goes somewhere else, or maybe maybe it's just something that he felt, hey, I can do this now. I should go ahead and do it. Doesn't preclude him from coming back to Bowling Green. So we'll see what happens there. Some really big news out of Wyoming. That running back Harrison Whaley and defensive end Sebastian Harsh are in the transfer portal. The Harrison Whaley news is really interesting given his situation a year ago. So in I guess was it August? I think it was he had late August, he had knee surgery. And they said he'd miss a few games, and he did. And then when he got healthy to come back, the team announced, hey, he's only going to play in 4 games to preserve his red shirt so he can come back next year. And at that time, Whaley talked really positive about the staff, how they came to this decision together, and they really wanted to come back in 2025 and do big things. So it's really kind of surprising to see Harrison Whaley enter the transfer portal. But nonetheless, he has. Florida Atlantic tight end Khalil Brantley has announced his retirement from football. Moving over to Conference USA, Commissioner Judy McLeod announced that all schools in Conference USA have opted in for the House settlement / revenue sharing. That decision, the court's decision should be coming, I think it's in April, early April, when that happens. And teams have to opt in. They're not required to opt in, but they opt in. And once they opt in, then what they are required to do is to meet those roster limit requirements, which it's not just for football or basketball; it's for all sports. So stay tuned to see what happens with the House settlement. A lot of teams are, moving forward like it's going to happen. 100%. I personally am not 100% confident it's going to happen, but maybe it just will, just because there's so many wheels already put in motion, and that momentum will push it to going. I don't know. We'll see. Northern Illinois, we talked about this earlier in the couple weeks ago when it happened. But Northern Illinois joined the Mountain West for football, so they had to find a home for the rest of their sports, and they have done that. And that is the Horizon League for the other sports. They will be joining Mountain West for football. Last week, the NCAA finally did something that shows they have somewhat of a brain. I don't know, back in January, Diego Pavia, quarterback at Vanderbilt, formerly New Mexico State, sued them about having additional eligibility when he was in JUCO, so basically saying the JUCO years don't count. Well, he won that lawsuit. Obviously, the NCAA is appealing it. And then, the NCAA at first said, well, this only applies to him. It doesn't apply to anybody else, which is kind of dumb, right? You're just begging for other people to sue you. So they eventually said, well, it applies to football. It doesn't apply to any other sports. And then they started getting sued by some baseball players and such. And so finally last week, the NCAA said, okay, this is what's going to happen, and it's going to apply to all sports as far as JUCO players go. So this is what it means. So if you played JUCO in either the 21-22, 22-23, 23-24, or 24-25 seasons, so one of those 4 seasons, that's the first requirement for the rule to apply to you. If the only year you played JUCO was in the COVID year, this ruling does not apply to you. It has to be after COVID. You played a JUCO year in one of those seasons from 21 through 25 after COVID. Additionally, 24 and 25 has to be your last season of eligibility. So if you were you still had additional eligibility, then the ruling does not apply to you. Might apply to you later, but they're saying right now it doesn't apply to you.
So you said in there in JUCO 21 through 25, but you mean the season that started in 24, it ended in 25, not
Correct.
this year.
Yeah. So like the 21, starting with the 21/22 season through the 24/25 season, you had to play JUCO in one of those years. And then the 24/25 season had to be your last year of eligibility, meaning you're out of eligibility. And this coming season, the 25/26 season, you have to be playing NCAA Division I level. So for football, that means FCS or FBS. One of those. So you can't be playing Division II or Division III. Doesn't count.
And to help people with this, those are the 3 requirements, so that next year this wouldn't apply because.
Well, right now, but the reason why they're saying it only applies to this coming season is they appealed that lawsuit, right? And so if they win, they're going to shut it down after this year. If they lose, then obviously, it's gonna repeat, rinse and repeat.
Gotcha.
And so if they end up losing, I can see where it becomes the fact that like JUCO years just don't count. Period. Which is what it would mean, I think, if they lost that appeal.
And then we've got a couple people here viewing live on X. We've got App State News. So Caden Robinson would have done his JUCO in the 1920, right?
He did it JUCO during COVID or right before COVID. Yeah, so that's a good example. This rule affected him because he was originally he transferred to UCLA and now he's no longer eligible.
Yes. Yep.
The last piece of news, it's not specifically G5 news, but it's college football news. And actually, I thought it was a great thing to see, a great idea. So many teams this spring are closing practices. They're not having spring games, or maybe it's not even a game. Maybe it's just, just a glorified practice, whatever, or controlled practice, controlled scrimmage. They're not having things open to the public, open to the fans. And the excuse is they're so worried about the transfer portal. I mean, I don't know. Like, I just feel like, folks just aren't like other colleges. If they're interested in your players, they're already interested in those players. They don't need to go to a spring game or a glorified practice or whatever you want to call it to say, oh, hey, see this guy, I really want him. I just think coaches are a little bit paranoid in that regard, right? But the coach today came out and we've had this conversation previously, Luke, where my feeling is they should be doing the opposite. They should be embracing the springtime, and it's an opportunity to build excitement in your fan base in the transfer portal era. Opportunity for fans to get to know who the new players on the team are, get familiar with them. It's just a very positive, in my opinion, a very positive PR potential for a football team, football program that they're missing out. Well, today a coach came out and basically took it even a step further, and that was Dion at Colorado. He came out and said, "Hey, we want to scrimmage somebody. We want to play a real team. We don't want to just play ourselves, and do it, and it'll be on TV and it'll be great." And I agree with them. It would be awesome, right? It'd be great, if you could get folks to the NCAA to allow you to do such thing. I believe I saw 2 coaches say, "Hey, we'd love to." One was Fran Brown at Syracuse, and I think the other was a coach at Prairie View A&M. I think those were the 2 coaches that kind of responded immediately and said, "We'd love to do it." Could you imagine if we got to see a Colorado versus Syracuse spring game? That'd be pretty cool, right? Even if it's just Colorado versus Prairie View A&M, just to kind of be able to see that. If other, you see it in basketball. Basketball has closed scrimmages. They're not televised. But yeah, I mean, I just think this would like, can you imagine, like, this is just another opportunity, like, for ESPNs of the world, everything's kind of shutting down. Basketball season's almost over for college basketball. Gives them some more programming, right? If they're able to show a Colorado versus Syracuse spring game. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Luke?
I think it's just one step closer to being a professional sport, and how the weird world of college football in particular is, I don't want to say necessarily college sports, but definitely college football is changing and becoming more and more like the NFL. And this would be another step towards that. And I don't disagree. If it happened, and it's almost like, legalizing drugs anywhere else in the States, it's like somebody wants to see it happen first. And it's like, oh, we can make money off this? Okay. Yeah, let's do that. I think there'd be, hey, let's see how this works. And then if we can, make a pretty penny off of it, let's do it. I think it would just grow in trends. But then, to the counterpoint, the teams that don't want to do spring games, well, then the last thing you want is a coach to be right there to see everything. So then it's the exact opposite of what those, coaches want. So it would be kind of interested in any of those coaches who have outwardly said no. And if they were to opt into this, be like, okay, you're chasing the money. And I hear you loud and clear.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a big Deion fan, but I do love this idea. And I think it'd be good for college football if they were able to do that. And again, it doesn't have to be, Colorado versus Syracuse. It could be Colorado versus Prairie View A&M. Could be good, good for those lower level schools to get some attention too. Like in college basketball, you might see a Colorado versus Syracuse close scrimmage, but then you might see a Colorado versus Prairie View A&M in an exhibition game that could be televised. So maybe that's, I don't know, maybe they can do something like that for college football. I don't know. Hopefully Deion brought some attention to it and at least got the conversation started. And maybe, in a few years it'll happen. We'll see.
If we're trying to get some money for a house settlement, this is a great idea to spur some extra income.
Absolutely.
But let's move on. We've got the nectar, the good stuff. This week's topic: Transfer Portal, Sun Belt Conference, coaching changes. We've got App State news in the chat. They want to see what's going on with App State. 5-6 last year. Remember, the game versus Liberty was canceled due to the hurricane. We got coaching changes. We got a new head coach, new OC, new DC head coach. Dal Loggins will be in his first season. 2021 and 2022, he was the tight ends coach at Arkansas. 2005 through 2020, he was in the pros, scouting assistant, quality control, passing game coordinators, QB coach, and he was an OC for the last 7 years. And then 2023 and 2024, he was at South Carolina, the OC and QB coach there. There's no OC on the coaching, so I just assume, given that he was an OC in the NFL, he was an OC at South Carolina, I'm going to go out on a limb and say Dal Loggins will also be calling plays there for App State. DC will be DJ Smith. He'll be in his first season. 2022 through 2024, he was the co-DC recruiting coordinator and linebacker coach at Missouri. Missouri's been pretty hot as of late and getting in some really good talent. So you like that with that recruiting background. In 2020 through 2021, he was the linebacker coach at Missouri. 2016 through 2019, he was with App State. He was on the staff as an outside linebacker coach, senior defensive analyst, and also the director of recruiting relations. So definitely has his pulse there on the recruiting format, and obviously been there for 3 years prior, so kind of knows that footprint.
All right, personnel-wise, they lose quite a bit, actually. On offense, quarterback Joey Aguilar off to UCLA, running back Anderson Castle off to Duke, wide receiver Mekhi Jackson, Indiana, wide receiver Caden Robinson was going to UCLA. Now he's going to try to go to the NFL with that recent JUCO ruling. And offensive lineman Jack Holyfield is off to Tulane. On the defensive side of the ball, they lose defensive lineman Marcus Clark to Liberty, defensive lineman Santana Hopper to Tulane, edge Nate Johnson to Missouri, linebacker Brendan Harrington to Georgia Southern, and cornerback Jason Chambers to West Virginia. Of all the losses, the biggest one's got to be on offense, right? Losing Aguilar, Jackson, and Robinson. That's a lot of production that they're going to have to replace from the passing game.
And even Castle, with being a homegrown talent and kid there, and then making his way to Duke, it's almost like the heartbeat type of like, hey, I've come watched your games, now I'm on the team, and worked his way into getting some time there this last year.
The key additions. So as we talked about, they got to bring in some folks on offense to kind of help fill the void. They bring in quarterback J.J. Cole from Iowa State, quarterback A.J. Swan from LSU, running back Khalifa Keith from Tennessee, running back Rashad Dubinion from Arkansas, wide receiver Devon Dozier from Arkansas, and offensive lineman Lance Williams from Virginia Tech. On the defensive side of things, they bring in edge Joseph Piccoli from Chattanooga, linebacker Brayshawn Littlejohn from Missouri, and safety Dylan Haas from Arkansas. I'm really intrigued, especially with those two running backs, bringing in Keith and Dubinion. Kanye Roberts returns. That's a lot of talented running backs, only one football. So I'm kind of interested to see how that plays out. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody leaves after the spring, just because I can see two of them getting a lot of carries, but I don't know that with one football there's enough carries to go around for three guys. I don't know. What do you think, Luke?
I agree, but what name sticks out to me is maybe my favorite name so far in going through all these names, and that's Brayshawn Littlejohn. I mean, what a name. What a name on the defensive side of the ball. Obviously, linebacker from Missouri follows, and you got DJ Smith with some time over there at Missouri. I'm kind of curious. I don't know the year of Littlejohn, but I'd be curious if DJ Smith has, brought him over in a sense.
Schedule wise next year, out of conference, they have Charlotte, Lindenwood, Boise State, and Oregon State. So not terribly difficult. Like you would hope they could go 2-2, maybe, right? Beat Charlotte and Lindenwood, lose to Boise State, Oregon State. Sun Belt, so from a conference schedule, is pretty brutal. Sun Belt East. I always think of the Sun Belt East as the G5 version of what used to be the SEC East, or SEC West, I guess it was. But yeah, I don't know. What are your expectations in year one? I mean, I think if he can, with given all the change, bowl eligibility going to do it. Obviously, they didn't make it to a bowl game last year. Do you think if they can get the 6 wins, that's gonna be considered a success for the fan base, or
App State News is in the chat. App State, what do you think? What does App State need? I think if they got 6 wins, I think it would be fine. I don't think they'd be super pumped about it. I think you've got big aspiration. J.J. Cole is a name to know, 4-star out of Iowa State. Just never made it onto the field. He's more of that statue like App State News says bowl game win or 8+ wins. So they're going to need to get 8 there. AJ Swan is an interesting name. He was over at Vanderbilt prior to LSU. Is that correct?
Yep. He was only at LSU the 1 year. He was a starter at Vanderbilt. Be interesting to see who wins that job. Like my gut says J.J. Cole's going to be the starter, but we'll see what happens in the spring and going into fall camp. It's going to be interesting. I mean, the Sun Belt has a lot of change. App State's one of the teams that's got a lot of change, and so I don't know. Like I guess I would say most of the Sun Belt games I would say are 50-50. Yeah, I mean I feel like out of conference they're probably 2-2, which means they got to win at least 4 games in conference to get to a bowl game, 6 to get to the 8 wins. It's possible. I would feel more comfortable saying I think they can get to the 6 wins than the 8, but we'll see. We got a long way to go before August. We'll see how things shake out here in the spring and the fall camp.
All right. Well, let's move over to the Arkansas State Red Wolves, 8-5 last season. Coaching changes. We just got a new DC, Griff McCarley. He'll be in his first season, elevated to DC from the linebacking coaching job he had in 2024. In 2023, he was an analyst in charge of linebackers for Ole Miss. OC Keith Heckendorf will be in his 7th season, and head coach Butch Jones going into his 5th season. Who do we got coming and leaving?
Some key departures in the transfer portal. On the offensive side of things, quarterback Timmy McClain off to Bethune-Cookman. Running back Zach Wallace is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Courtney Jackson is out of eligibility. Wide receiver / tight end Reggie Harden is in the transfer portal. And on the defensive side of things, probably the biggest, I would think in my opinion, the biggest blow from a single player, safety Dante Joyner off to Maryland. Joyner had an outstanding year for the Red Wolves in 2024. Obviously, losing Wallace Jackson hurts a little bit too, but I feel like they're probably more prepared on offense to fill those voids than finding a Dante Joyner level player on the defensive side of things. So I think that's going to hurt them there on defense. Some key additions bringing in through the transfer portal on the offensive side of things. They bring in running back Kenyon Clay from Southern Miss, wide receiver J.J. Harrell from Mississippi State, and tight end Tyler Fortenberry from Vanderbilt. On the defensive side of things, they bring in linebacker Wyatt Wright from NC State, linebacker Aaron Alexander from Michigan State, cornerback Avante Dickerson from Utah State, cornerback A.G. McGee from Marshall, and safety Trevon Howard from Iowa State. It's going to be year 3 of Jalen Rayner. Corey Rucker returns, so that certainly helps when your number 1 wide receiver returns. Offensively, I think this team will be fine. Hopefully, you'll see some growth from Jalen Rayner. He had some
up and down season.
Yeah, he had some growing pains in year 2 as a sophomore. Hopefully, in his junior year, you'll see that growth and be able to take that offense to the next level. Defense, I think, is where the big improvement's going to have to come from in order for them to kind of improve upon their season a year ago, which was a successful season, right? Made it to a bowl game. I believe they won the bowl game. So I think they can at least do that. But if they want to compete for a Sun Belt title, I believe defense is what's going to have to make the most improvements in order for the Red Wolves to compete for that Sun Belt title in 2025. Their out-of-conference schedule again, it's probably 50-50 with it. They probably end the out of conference schedule 2-2. They play Southeast Missouri State, Arkansas, Iowa State, and Kennesaw State. So they probably lose to Arkansas and Iowa State. They probably beat Southeast Missouri State and Kennesaw State.
I think they went to Iowa State last year. Does Iowa State go to Arkansas
Iowa State? That's exactly where I was going. Iowa State comes to Arkansas State. So that's pretty awesome, right? Not often you see a Power 4 school come to a G5, and so yes, Iowa State comes to town September 13th to Arkansas State. So
that's probably right after their game against Iowa, because
it's right after Arkansas State's game against Arkansas. So not great timing from Arkansas State's perspective, but yeah. And then they play the Sun Belt. So yeah, I feel like Arkansas State's, if the defense improves, I can see them competing for a Sun Belt West title. If the defense does not, then they're probably looking at number 2 or number 3 team in the Sun Belt West.
I think the most interesting thing here is Timmy McClain leaving, because there were points last year that we were really curious, like, hey, because Timmy came in here or there. I mean, they were kind of blowouts, but like sometimes he provided enough.
Spark, yeah,
looked a little bit better, and hey, is Timmy going to be more of the picture? And we kept hearing, no, it's not, and this lays it to rest. Timmy McClain leaving.
I'm a little surprised he had to go down to the FCS. They didn't get, at least another G5 offer, but it is what it is.
It is cold. It is a cold world out here in G5 football. Let's talk about Coastal Carolina Chanticleers. 6-7 last season. We've got coaching changes for the OC and DC. Drew Hollingshead will be the new OC, be in his first season, 2023 and 2024. He was the co-OC and quarterback coach for Western Kentucky. Typically, you like to see Western Kentucky there and throwing the ball around. 2022, he was the inside receivers coach for Mississippi State. DC, Jeremiah Johnson, will be in his first season. In 2024, he was the defensive coordinator at Louisiana Tech. Prior to that, in 2023, he was the defensive coordinator at UNI, or University of Northern Iowa, by my neck of the woods. In 2022, he was the defensive coordinator at Kent State. And before he was at Kent State, he had 15 years at UNI, with 9 being the defensive coordinator. So if you're kind of following that path, it's being at UNI, goes to Kent State, goes back to UNI, then goes to Louisiana Tech, and now here at Coastal. Tim Beck, head coach, coming back for his 3rd season. All right, Justice, who's leaving?
Well, before we get to that, I think the interesting thing with the coaches here is, what's this offense going to look like? Because what Beck likes to do and what Hollingshead likes to do are 2 different things, right? So I'm interested to see, like, what are we actually going to get? I think Tim Beck likes to run the ball a little bit more, whereas Hollingshead, he comes from the Mike Leach tree, run and shoot. Don't really run the ball too much, and so I don't. And we'll get to the personnel they bring in, but I think who they select at quarterback might tell us what they're thinking along offense. But let's get to that.
So I have my thought. What do you think? What do you think this team is? Which way do they lean? The team.
I think they're going to lean with Beck, because I think this is a make or break season for Tim Beck. I think if he doesn't, produce as they expect, then he's gone. And so I don't know. I feel like a lot of times when folks are in that situation, they're going to bet on themselves.
Exactly.
I lean it's going to look more like a Tim Beck offense than a run and shoot Mike Leach offense. But we'll see.
Same wavelength as you. Like, that's what I think. You got these two offensive, defensive coordinators usually. So behind the scenes, Justin and I have been working on coaching what the coaches came in what years and this and that. And I went through a lot of G5 teams from 2016 through last year. And it is not uncommon. It is very common. It's actually more uncommon to not see this. When it is you're on the hot seat, an offensive or defensive coordinator get fired first before you're gone the next year. And typically that player or that coach calling plays is, like you said, like, all right, if I'm going to get fired, I'm going to get fired because of me, not because I put my trust in someone else. So I think this will definitely be a Tim Beck looking offense and run the ball.
All right, let's get to the personnel. Some key departures on the offensive side of things. Quarterback Ethan Vasco is off to Liberty. Quarterback Noah Kim off to Eastern Michigan. Running back Braden Bennett to Virginia Tech. And running back Christian Washington off to San Diego State. On the defensive side of things, defensive lineman Diamante Diggs is off to Florida State. Defensive lineman Will Whitson is off to Mississippi State. Edge Clev Lubin went to Louisville, and I think like 3 days ago said, I'm out of Louisville. So he's back he's going to enter the transfer portal once again. Cornerback Matthew McDoom off to Cincinnati. Cornerback Christian Conyer going to App State. And safety Tobias Fletcher is out of eligibility. All these losses are pretty big for this team, right? I mean, you lose your quarterbacks, you lose your running backs, and you pretty much lose your defensive backs and your defensive line. Like, there are huge holes that Coastal Carolina has to replace for the 2025 season. And I don't know, like, I personally don't see him doing it, but we'll see. Let's get to the key additions. They bring in quarterback MJ Morris from Maryland, quarterback Emmett Brown from San Jose State, running back Jalen John from UMass, and wide receiver Malcolm Gilley from Ball State on the offensive side of things. On the defensive side of things, they bring in edge Noah Arenze from New Mexico State, cornerback Lionel Whitaker from Maryland, cornerback Robbie Washington from Miami, safety Dante Thomas from Kansas State, and cornerback Miles Mu-Young from Miami. Miles Mu-Young, that's got to be an all-name team right there. They had McDoom last year. Now they got Mu-Young. Hopefully he can play like McDoom. McDoom had an outstanding year at corner for Coastal Carolina in 2024. So earlier I was saying, like, I think who they select at quarterback might tell us a lot about what they plan to run on offense. MJ Morris and Emmett Brown are two different style of quarterbacks, right? MJ Morris is more of a dual threat quarterback, whereas Emmett Brown is not. I'm not saying he's a statue, but he's more of your prototypical pocket passer, right? And so I don't know. Like, to me, like, I still think it's going to be a Tim Beck offense, but if I see that MJ Morris is going to be the quarterback, then I really think it's going to be a Tim Beck offense. And then if it's Emmett Brown could go either way, but I can see it. If it's going to be a Drew Hollingshead offense, I think Emmett Brown's probably the starting quarterback.
I think you lean Emmett Brown just due to starting reps, and Emmett Brown had no problem handing the ball off to Chalk the fourth.
Yeah, he could be both. I was just saying, like, if it ends up being a Drew Hollingshead, I'd be shocked if MJ Morris was the starter.
Gotcha. I just think
if Morris is a starter, it definitely tells us that it's more of a Tim Beck style offense. But
yeah,
be interesting to kind of see how it plays out. Their out of conference schedule is Virginia, Charleston Southern, East Carolina, and South Carolina. So that's probably That's a brutal out of conference schedule with only you're probably looking at 1-3, right? You beat Charleston Southern, but you probably lose to Virginia, East Carolina, and South Carolina. Couple that with the Sun Belt schedule. At the end of the year, I don't think Tim Beck is the Chanticleers coach any longer.
Uphill battle for this season. Well, let's shift gears over to the Georgia Southern Eagles, 8-5 last year. Kind of a surprising, I think, 8-5. It's kind of a roller coaster of a year, but no coaching changes. Head coach Clay Helton comes back for his 4th season. OC Ryan Applin comes back for his 2nd season, and DC Brandon Bailey comes back for his 3rd season. Justice, who is leaving?
They do have some losses on both sides of the ball, some pretty big losses. Backup quarterback on the offensive side of things, backup quarterback Dexter Williams II off to Kennesaw State. Running back Jalen White, their star running back, is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Derwin Burgess out of eligibility. Offensive tackle Weston Wallace is off to Western Kentucky. On the defensive side of things, linebacker Marquise Watson-Trent, friend of the show, off to Nebraska, and safety Mark Stampley II off to Houston. That Marquise Watson-Trent loss is going to be as big for them, man. Like he was the leader of that defense. He was an all-conference player. If it wasn't for like Mike Green last year, he probably was the conference defensive player of the year. That's I don't know that they're going to have someone that's going to be able to replace the leadership and just the skill that Marquise brought to that defense. So that's a big hole to have to replace. I know a lot of Georgia Southern Eagles fans are ready for a new coach too. I think they feel like, Helton's just he's going to get them 8 wins a year, 7-8 wins, and that's kind of his limit, right? He's not going to be able to bring him to the promised land. We saw that last year. They were in the leader's seat for a while there to win the Sun Belt East, and they just they came to Old Dominion, they were in a tie for first with Old Dominion. Old Dominion put it on them on a Thursday night on ESPN, and
that was at ODU, right?
It was at ODU, and then they were still had a shot there at the end of the year, and they just kind of crumbled and couldn't.
But then they did like wild games where they were down by a whole bunch, and then you'd turn a game off and you'd oh, they won. How did that happen? There's just some wild finishes that they had.
They do return, the quarterback and J.C. French, as well as wide receiver Josh Dallas. One player that I didn't mention in the departure list is quarterback David Dallas, who is Josh Dallas's brother. I don't think I can't remember, did he officially retire or did he just say I'm stepping away for right now? But nonetheless, he's not going to be with the team in 2025. I think he had some injuries last year. I don't know. I can't remember if he's totally hanging up or he's just gonna sit out a year.
If I'm recalling, the tweet or whatnot, it was I very much got the vibe of I'm going pro in something other than sports. That was
he's done. He's done playing football.
That's what I get. I mean, but who knows? You're allowed to change your mind after a while.
Well, this is not right. Looking at this, I must have.
That is Fresno.
Yeah, hold on. Let me go to the show sheet. I must have when I was typing up the graphic, I must have failed to put in who's coming. So it's not going to be on the sheet on the video because that graphic is wrong. So who they bring in on offense? Quarterback Turner Helton coming over from Western Kentucky. Wide receiver Camden Brown from Auburn. Wide receiver Brian Green Jr. from Florida. And tight end River Helms from Western Kentucky. It's kind of interesting to see, we see in the departures list, offensive tackle goes from one Helton brother to the other Helton brother. And then on the flip side, we see River Helms and Turner Helton, who I believe is Clay's son, come over from Western Kentucky. So it's just kind of weird. Like you see players jumping from one brother to the next. In Turner's case, it's not that weird, right? They're both family members. But my guess is maybe Turner and River Helms had a pretty good rapport. On the defensive side of things, they bring in defensive lineman Uche Ulo from Georgia Tech, linebacker Brendan Harrington, who we mentioned earlier from App State, cornerback A.J. Brown from Ole Miss, safety Jaden Davis from Georgia Tech, and safety Antonio White Jr. comes over from Rutgers. As I mentioned, they do return J.C. French and Josh Dallas. I think they're going to be okay on offense. Again, I think they got to get more consistent play out of J.C. French. He was very inconsistent a year ago, and they got to get better play out of the defense, which to me seems like that's going to be a tough call, especially losing Marquise Watson Trent. Out of conference schedule, they play Fresno State, USC, Jacksonville State, and Maine.
I think obviously you have a chance to go 3-1. I think.
I mean they do. USC's probably lost the Fresno State and Jacksonville State games. They probably should be favored in, or they're close. And they should beat Maine. And then you got the Sun Belt schedule, which again, like we talked about, Sun Belt, one of the best football conferences in the G5. I think last year you looked at several rankings, they were the best in the G5 from top to bottom. So I don't know. I think this could be a year where Helton struggles to get to 6 wins and he's gone out the door. I don't know.
That would be that would be a real disappointment. I mean, I feel like that would be a nail in his coffin of if you go 3-1 in that out of conference and you get 6 or fail to get 6, and that would be a real tough pill to swallow.
I mean, like to me, like the Fresno State game is probably a 50-50 game. They should be. It is at Fresno State. Yeah.
Yeah, that'll be a tough game.
They should beat Jacksonville State. I think Jacksonville State loses a lot from last year, and they should beat Maine. But then, like even you look at the conference schedule, the teams they have to play in the Sun Belt from the Sun Belt West, Southern Miss and Arkansas State. Southern Miss wasn't great last year, but they bring over Charles Huff. We'll get there in a minute, but they bring over basically a lot of the Marshall team that won the Sun Belt a year ago, right? So you can't count on them being terrible once again. Arkansas State is a good team. Then you got the Sun Belt East. So, I mean, I think given the schedule, 6 wins would probably be a positive thing. But what I expect, but I can tell you, Georgia Southern fans, that's not going to work. They want to see more than the 7-8 wins he gets every year, and so Helton could be another one that's looking for a new job after the 2025 season.
Well, who's not going to be looking for a new job next year? That's going to be Del McGee, Georgia State Panthers. They were 3-9 last season, but I love what they've got going on. No coaching changes heading into their second season. Del McGee, head coach. Jim Chaney will be his second season as OC. DC Kevin Schurrier will be in his second season. They I just like what they're doing. They're building momentum going into the year. Got a couple good recruits, but who's leading?
Yeah, they you're right. They've brought in some talent. They've been killing it on the recruiting angle. Some key departures on the offensive side of things for the Georgia State Panthers. Quarterback Zach Gibson is in the transfer portal. Fairly recently, running back Freddie Brock entered the transfer portal. Wide receiver Talik Williams is off to Western Michigan. Offensive lineman Lamar Robinson to California. And star tight end from the 2024 season, Dorian Fleming, is off to Maryland. On the defensive side of things, they lose edge Kevin Swint out of eligibility, and safety J.J. Johnson is off to NC State. That Fleming loss is a big loss, right? He was kind of a safety blanket, super productive year in 2024. So that's going to be a big loss. And then Kevin Swint on the defensive side of things, he was their disruptor, their pass rusher, the one making it tough on opposing quarterbacks. That's gonna be a big loss to someone they have to replace on the defensive side of the ball. Looking at who they bring in on offense, quarterback PJ Hatter, Texas State, one of my personal favorite quarterbacks. Quarterback Cameron Brown from Texas Tech. Running back DJ Braswell from South Carolina. Wide receiver Leo Blackburn from Georgia Tech. Offensive tackle Obadiah Obasuyi from NC State. Offensive lineman Charlie Patterson from Virginia. Offensive lineman DeAndre Duffus from Maryland. On the defensive side of things, they bring in edge Marlon Dean from Utah State, safety Jordan Huff from East Carolina, and cornerback Bernard Causey III from LSU. We don't normally talk about freshmen, but there's two freshmen I think we need to mention. We don't normally talk about freshmen in this series, but there's two freshmen I think we should mention for Georgia State because they were both really key gets, and they're both running backs. LaDainian Martin and Taquan Payton, I think, is the other one. Those were two huge gets for Georgia State. And they bring in DJ Braswell. And I'm assuming between the three of them, that's when Freddie Brock said, hey, it's time for me to go find somewhere else. And quarterbacks, PJ Hatter's more in the Zach Gibson mold for what we saw last year, in terms of he's a mobile quarterback, can do it with his legs, dual threat. Christian Veillere returns, but Christian Veillere, not mobile. He's a prototypical pocket passer. And they swapped him and Gibson in and out a lot a year ago. Be interested to see if Veillere. I think if they want Veillere to be the quarterback, if he can get the time and get the protection, he can have a great, outstanding year. Him and Ted Hurst returns, breakout star from 2024. If they can get the offensive line to kind of hold up and give Veillere some protection, maybe he will be the starting quarterback. If not, they could be like last year, where they go to one of the more mobile options like a PJ Hatter. But I'm really excited to see this running back room. DJ Braswell, high-level recruit at South Carolina, never really got things going there. Comes over to Georgia State, and then, like I said, the two freshmen were highly rated recruits as well. So definitely recruiting well, especially in that running back room. Did you have any thoughts on any of the players before we get to the schedule, Luke?
No.
Looking at their out-of-conference schedule, they play Ole Miss, Memphis, Murray State, and Vanderbilt. Ole Miss and Vanderbilt, you say it's tough, right? But they beat Vanderbilt last year. Vanderbilt looked pretty good, other than the Georgia State game. They beat Alabama. I'm sure Vanderbilt's going to be looking for some revenge in 2025. And then Memphis, right? Memphis lost a ton of guys. I was looking at Jonah Dillon's tweet today about Pro Day, and it must have been, oh my God, like 15, 16 players, impact players that Memphis lost. Quarterback, receivers, running backs, defense, all across the board. And so that Memphis game is not quite as tough as you might think, at least today, right? Based on all the losses they have, and then Murray State's the other out-of-conference game. So, I assume they're probably hoping for at least 2-2 out of conference, and then you have the Sun Belt schedule. Be interesting to kind of see what improvements this team makes. Because last year, Del McGee was kind of drew the short straw, kind of, so to speak, right? Head coach left during the middle of spring practice. They basically put spring practice on hold. They bring in Del McGee, and he's already behind the eight ball, right? Having to bring players in, get people familiar with how he wants to do things, his offense. I feel like this year we should really get more of a vision of what he wants to do, right? Where he's had a full off season to kind of bring in his personnel, do the kind of things he wants to do. And so, I think Georgia State's a team that's on the rise. And I look for big improvements in 2025.
Well, let's move over to another team that maybe had a surprising year. James Madison Dukes, 9-4. Coaching changes. They get a new defensive coordinator, and Colin Hitchler will be his first season. He was the co-DC and safeties coach at Alabama last year. In 2023, he was the co-DC at Wisconsin. In 2018 through 2022, he was with Cincinnati and then became the safeties coach in 2020 and was promoted to co-DC in 2022. So, been with Cincinnati for a while. OC Dean Kennedy, he'll be his second. When I think of Dean Kennedy, I was thinking of a wrestling reference that my geeky side, like Mr. Kennedy, nobody will know unless they watch wrestling a while. Maybe some wrestling fans will get it. Anyways, head coach Bob Chesney will be in his second season. Who's leaving, Justice?
Key departures for the James Madison Dukes. On offense, you got wide receiver Cam Ross off to Virginia. Wide receiver Omarion Dollison. I don't know why I put JMU in there. He's out of eligibility. He was at JMU. He's out of eligibility. Tight end Taylor Thompson, same thing. He's out of eligibility. Offensive tackle Tyshawn Wyatt is off to Virginia. And offensive tackle Jesse Ramil off to Mississippi State. On the defensive side of things, edge Eric O'Neill off to Rutgers, edge Kari Mans out of eligibility, and cornerback Terrence Spence out of eligibility. I'd say the biggest losses are on defense, right? All three of those guys were impact players a year ago. Eric O'Neill had an outstanding season. He's probably a little bit overshadowed again by Mike Green at Marshall. But Eric O'Neill had a great season, parlayed that into moving over to Rutgers. Kari Mans certainly had some special games as well. And cornerback Terrence Spence was one of the top cornerbacks in all of college football. He was, I believe, on the watch list or maybe semi-finalist list for the Jim Thorpe Award for the best defensive back in college football. He had an outstanding season a year ago. He was one of the tops in the nation. I believe he had 5 interceptions. So those losses on defense are probably the biggest ones, and they're going to have to replace those players. Let's see who they bring in. Key additions on offense. They bring in quarterback Matt Sluka from he's not from JMU. He comes over from UNLV. He played 3 games, and then he had the NIL spat with UNLV saying that they didn't deliver on their promises. They also bring in quarterback Camden Coleman from Richmond, wide receiver Nick DeGennaro from Richmond, wide receiver Landon Ellis from Richmond, offensive tackle Cam McNair from Holy Cross, offensive lineman Zach Greenberg from North Carolina. On the defensive side of thing, they bring in edge Aiden Gabara from Notre Dame, edge Lakota Dupre from Charlotte, and cornerback Chance Harley from Maryland. So, a lot of you guys might be wondering, why did they bring in 2 quarterbacks? Alonzo Barnett returns. If you don't remember, Alonzo Barnett got hurt in the last game of the regular season against Marshall on the very last play of the game. I don't know they've ever officially said what it is, but I'm pretty sure it was an ACL injury. The general consensus is that Alonzo Barnett will not play in the 2025 season, thus the need to bring in Matt Sluka and then even Camden Coleman. Matt Sluka, very familiar with the coaching staff very familiar with them. He was the quarterback at Holy Cross with Coach Chesney and Kennedy. Last year, like I said, he went to UNLV, played 3 games, I think it was, and then left, and now he's back with Coach Chesney at JMU. I did hear that they said Barnett was cleared to do some things in spring practice. My guess is that's move around, maybe throw the ball. Like, I certainly don't think he's a full participant. I mean, everything I've seen, read, heard, kind of the general belief is that Alonzo Barnett will not play in the 2025 season. And Matt, I think a lot of folks assume Matt Sluka is going to be a quarterback. And for good reason, right? I mean, obviously there's familiarity there, but I don't know. Like, Matt Sluka wasn't very impressive at UNLV, in my opinion. He had him off to a great start, but he was impressive running the ball. Passing the ball was not good at all. Now maybe this staff knows how to use him in the passing game, obviously more so than the UNLV staff did, and they'll be able to get some production out of him. But he did not look like a competent passer to me in his time at UNLV. And Camden Coleman is no slouch, man. He's a pretty good quarterback in his own right. Personally, like, if Camden Coleman was the starting quarterback at JMU week 1, that wouldn't shock me at all. I think it would shock a lot of other folks. I think most folks just kind of assume it's going to be Matt Sluka, but I don't know. Camden Coleman's definitely going to be some competition for Sluka.
Hey, and before we get too much further, we got somebody in the chat on X, Marquise Watson-Trent in the house. Good luck at Nebraska. You're fun to watch.
Absolutely. I hope you have an outstanding season and can parlay that into being an NFL draft pick in 2020, 2026. The JMU schedule out of conference, Weber State, Louisville, Liberty, and Washington State. Outside the Louisville game, right? It's not anything terrible. Be interested to see how that Liberty game shakes out. Kind of 2 in-state teams. I couldn't tell you the last time JMU and Liberty played each other, so that's definitely be an interesting game. I think JMU, and for good reason, expects to be competing for a Sun Belt East title and a Sun Belt championship year in and year out. And I don't necessarily think this year will be drastically different, especially if they can replace Spence at cornerback and the 2 defensive linemen and Eric O'Neill and Kari Mans. I think that's kind of really be the key thing for JMU is that defense. They traditionally have a pretty good defense, and so we'll see if that with those departures, if they can continue that trend in 2025.
I know, like, coaching staffs don't play the game and don't win the games, but I like what Chesney and Kennedy have been doing, and they're able to just kind of adapt to, like, what players that they have, whatever level Chesney's been at. So I think they're going to try to get a lot of streamers going here in 2025. So let's go on to the next team, and that is the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns. We've got no coaching changes. They were 10-4 last season. Probably a surprising team this last season. Head coach Michael Desimo will be in his 4th season. OC Tim Lager will be in his 5th season. He had 1 season as a co-offensive coordinator, and he did that with Desimo in 2021. So he's got 4 seasons as being a just OC. And then DC Jim Salgado will be in his 2nd season. Who do we got leaving, Justice?
Key departures for the Louisiana Ragin Cajuns on offense. Quarterback Ben Wildridge out of eligibility. Running back Draylen Washington off to Alabama. Wide receiver Harvey Broussard III off to Houston. Wide receiver Lance Lehendre out of eligibility. Tight end Terrence Carter Jr. off to Texas Tech. Defensive side of things, linebacker Carmicah Glass off to Houston. Cornerback Caleb Anderson off to Michigan. Cornerback Justin Agu off to Louisville. And safety Tyrone Lewis Jr. is off to the NFL. Those offensive departures are probably the biggest ones, right? Quarterback and especially Terrence Carter Jr. Terrence Carter had a breakout season a year ago. They kind of struggled without Ben Wildridge when he got, he missed a few games there at the end of the season. So yeah, I think that those offense is probably the bigger question mark. That Tyrone Lewis Jr. loss is pretty big too. Him and Tyree Skipper, 2 of the best safeties in all of college football, much less just the G5. So that Tyrone Lewis Jr. That loss will be big on defense. But like I said, they do return Tyree Skipper, who also was outstanding performer for them. Key additions on the offensive side of things, they bring in a couple of high-level recruits from the Power 4. Quarterback Walker Howard, one-time LSU, most recently Ole Miss, and then wide receiver Shelton Sampson coming over from LSU. I think the natural assumption is those guys are going to, be day one starters. Walker Howard, was a high-level recruit at LSU, ends up going to Ole Miss, and now he's in Louisiana. Hasn't done much in his college career at this point. Probably his claim to fame is that really awkward, that really awkward video with what's his name, Coach Brian Kelly.
Brian Kelly, Brian Kelly.
Yeah, that really awkward, cringeworthy video. That's probably like Walker Howard's biggest moment in college football to this point. So hopefully he can have some bigger moments there for the Ragin' Cajuns in 2025. On the defensive side of things, they bring in cornerback Trey Tomlinson from Richmond and cornerback Curly Reed III coming over from Washington. I don't know. I mean, I don't see Louisiana as a favorite in the Sun Belt West in 2025, given the changes on offense. I think they're probably a top half team, but I don't know that they're the number one team. But I think we said the same thing last offseason about Louisiana, and they ended up winning the Sun Belt West. I think we had them at third, right? I think we had South Alabama and Texas State above them, if my memory is correct. Man, the Sun Belt West is pretty loaded too, though, right? You got South Alabama, Texas State, Arkansas State, Southern Miss looking much improved. Who am I missing? Troy. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think they get to a bowl game. I guess it wouldn't shock me if they won the Sun Belt West, but I don't think at this point that they're a favorite. I don't know. I'd put them I'd probably have them at best fourth. Looking at their schedule, out of conference schedule, they play Rice, McNeese, Missouri, and Eastern Michigan. Very manageable schedule there, right? I mean, Missouri really the only 100% loss. Rice, brand new coaching staff. Eastern Michigan got a lot to replace on that offense as well, and so I would think they're probably favored in 3 of those games, right? So they go 3-1 out of conference, and then they only got to win 3 games in conference to make it to a bowl game. So that seems easily doable. for Louisiana in 2025.
Then depending on, if Walker Howard is able to piece it together and be the guy there, I feel like he can easily get you, a couple wins. I think really Terrence Carter is a big loss to this team. He was a great asset for them last season. And then obviously Ben Wooldridge had a great year. The Draylen Washington to Alabama is interesting. It just seems like one of those things that we talk about where it's like, maybe I'm promised X, Y, or Z, and
hopefully he's getting good money, right? Because that I agree. That seems like a real head scratcher. Hopefully he got a lot of NIL money to go over to Alabama.
So, all right. Well, let's move on to our next team, and that is Marshall Thundering Herd, 10-3 last season, but we got all new coaches. Head coach Tony Gibson will be in his first season, 2020 through 2024. He was the DC and linebacker coach at NC State. 2019, he was the defensive coordinator and safeties coach at NC State. OC Rod Smith will be in his first season, 2022 through 2024. He was Jacksonville State's OC and QB coach. In 2024, he was the interim head coach there at Jacksonville State when Richard left. 2021, as an offensive analyst at Virginia. In 2018 through 2020, OC and QB coach at Illinois and interim head coach in 2020. DC, Shannon Morrison, first season. This will be his fourth. This was what was interesting. This is going to be his fourth stint with the Herd in 2005 through 2005 to 2008. He was linebacker coach the first two seasons and then was the safeties coach the following two seasons. He was also a grad assistant with them in 1995, not in 96, but in 1997. And then he was the linebacking coach in 2021 through 2023. So he's been like in these little pockets of like almost like, I guess you could call them decades. You got the 90s and then the mid 2000s, and then your linebacking coach here, and then you had an off year last year, not with the team, and then you come back. He has defensive coordinator experience. He was the co-DC at Bowling Green in 2009. Defensive coordinator at Lehigh in 2004, defensive coordinator at Southeast Missouri in 2001 through 2003. So while he's had different non-DC jobs at Marshall, he's had DC experience in other places. He also played at Marshall and helped them to their first ever FCS national championship in 1992. Just a lot of history there.
The whole Marshall thing is just kind of interesting, right? I mean, it's not unheard of for a coach to win a title, championship, and then move on because he's going to like bigger and better school. But in this case, like Marshall wins the Sun Belt. The very next day, Charles Huff is going to another Sun Belt school in Southern Miss, and that was just a weird situation that kind of,
played out over the years.
Oh yeah, well, and then like even towards the end, right? Like it wasn't a very well kept secret that Huff was going to be the Southern Miss head coach, right?
Yeah.
Feels like that talk started probably 3 or 4 weeks before the start of the season. Even went so far as I think for the Sun Belt Championship game. Some Southern Miss boosters or fans sent I want to say like a flower arrangement or something to the hotel, wishing Coach Huff the best of luck in the Sun Belt Championship, and it was pretty, like making it known it was from Southern Miss. Just a very awkward and weird situation, and then we saw it culminate in the bowl game, right, where Marshall had to back out of the bowl game, and then they ultimately got fined, I think, $100,000 from the Sun Belt for having to do that because they lost so many players. And before we get to that, we'll get to the players, but I think like the totals, if you combine what they lost and what they had to bring in, it was like 75 plus players. So a massive amount of roster turnover coming and going for the Marshall Thundering Herd. And as you can see, the font on this slide is really small because of so many. And there's probably ones we're gonna miss, and you'll see a common theme here. And keep in mind when we get to Southern Miss, we're going to be repeating a lot of these names because a lot of players followed Charles Huff over to Southern Miss. So let's start with the offensive side of things. Quarterback Braylon Braxton off to Southern Miss. Running back A.J. Turner off to Minnesota. Wide receiver Tyshawn Chapman off to Southern Miss. Wide receiver Elijah Metcalf off to Southern Miss. Wide receiver Braylon Brown, Southern Miss. Wide receiver Chuck Montgomery, Southern Miss. Wide receiver Christian Fitzpatrick is out of eligibility, and tight end Cade Conley is off to Western Michigan. On the defensive side of things, defensive lineman Chris Thomas Jr. is off to Syracuse. Edge J.J. Hawkins is off to Southern Miss. Edge Mike Green, who for some reason why I didn't put on the sheet, I don't know. Mike Green off to the NFL draft. First round draft pick here in about a month. Linebacker Jaden Yates off to Ole Miss. Linebacker Landon Watson off to Kentucky. Cornerback A.J. McGee off to Arkansas State. Cornerback Josh Moten off to Southern Miss. Safety Corey Myrick off to Southern Miss. Cornerback Jacoby Henderson off to Rutgers. And safety J.J. Roberts out of eligibility. Again, massive turnover on this roster for Marshall, with a majority of them going and following the coaching staff over to Southern Miss. So who do they bring in given all these losses? On the offensive side of things, they bring in quarterback Carlos Del Rio Wilson from Syracuse, quarterback Zion Turner from Jacksonville State, running back Michael Allen from UNLV, wide receiver Antonio Harmon from Mississippi State, wide receiver Jacoby Baldwin from NC State, offensive tackle Bryce Biggs from West Virginia. On the defensive side of things, they bring in defensive tackle Jamal Weiss Jr. from South Carolina, linebacker Jabril Alameen from Jacksonville State, linebacker Kanan Lewis from NC State, linebacker Jalen Parker from NC State, and cornerback Philip Davis from Michigan State. Man, I don't know. Marshall fans probably might not agree with me, but this feels like a total rebuild, and it's going to be a down year for Marshall, given the massive amount of change that's taken place.
Carlos Del Rio Wilson, a name that I had forgotten about.
Yeah, he was not very impressive in his time at Syracuse. That addition doesn't give me the warm and fuzzies if I'm relying on him to be my QB1.
You would think the inside track is Zion Turner coming from Jacksonville State. Rod Smith, OC, comes over from Jacksonville State. You'd think that he's got the leg up there. Michael Allen is a very interesting name. Liked him there at his time at UNLV. So that
he was at NC State first. He was a pretty high level recruit. So I'm sure the NC State connection with Gibson is what got Michael Allen.
Yep. So there's a lot to like, but going into last year, we didn't really know what we were going to get out of the Thundering Herd based off of what Charles Huff likes to do versus trying to think of the
Seth Dougie.
We didn't really know, and it turned out to be pretty good. So it just seems like another year of uncertainty heading into the season. That just like it's going to be hard to be as great as you were last season.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's going to be a down year for Marshall. I certainly don't expect to see them winning the Sun Belt or even winning the Sun Belt East. Their schedule from out of conference perspective seems fairly manageable. Besides week one they play Georgia. But after that, they play Missouri State, Eastern Kentucky, and Middle Tennessee. Right? Those games don't, seem overly difficult. They could win all three. They go 3-1 out of conference, but then then they start the conference slate, and in addition to the tough Sun Belt East, they get Louisiana and Texas State as their Sun Belt West opponents. So two tough opponents there. I'm really I don't know, slightly surprised the Sun Belt didn't make Southern Miss one of Marshall's Sun Belt West opponents.
Go play at Marshall.
They'll have to wait for that to happen. It's not happening next year. Maybe we'll see that in 2026. But I think I might be shocked. Even if they went 3-1, I still think they might be hard pressed to get to a bowl game. I think if they get to a bowl game in year one under Gibson, that's a success.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to another team searching for a bowl win this year. And if they don't win it, I think there might be a coaching change. It's Old Dominion Monarchs, 5-7 last season. No coaching changes yet for this season, but head coach Ricky Ronnie in his 6th season. Is it his 5th? We're not so sure. There are 0 games played.
I mean, it's his 5th year coaching game, but he was here. He's been there for 6 years. ODU didn't. ODU, I think, and UConn were the only 2 teams that didn't play in the COVID year.
So 0 games played in 2020 in his first season there. So technically it's his 6th season. Anyway, offensive coordinator Kevin Decker will be in his 3rd season. And then DC Blake Styler will be in his 6th season. Or maybe it's his 5th. Same as Ronnie, the COVID season. Justice, this is your 2nd favorite team behind ECU Pirates. Tell us, who's leaving the room and who's coming.
Before we get to that, I do agree with you. I think this is a make or break year for Coach Ronnie. I think he's got to at least get 7 wins. I think the expectations might be a little bit higher given so much change in the Sun Belt and what he has coming back. But this really feels like a do or die year for Coach Ronnie. Otherwise, he could be looking for a job, I think, in the 2026 season.
Do you feel that 4th and 3 at the 38-yard line, or maybe the 42, that he's like going for it? Or is it Ricky?
Well, it depends on you're talking about like at the end of the game or like in the middle of the game.
It's the whatever typical situation you want to put Ricky Ronnie.
I mean, he's typically super conservative. I mean that's not a secret. Yeah, he's typically a very, very conservative coach. Sometimes, in my opinion, too conservative. So I don't know. We'll see if that changes going in this year. Given, like I said, that I think he's a little bit on the hot seat. If it doesn't happen for him this year at Old Dominion, it's probably not going to happen. He'll probably be looking for a new job. And given the talent they bring back, I think that there's expectations, and he's going to need to live up to those expectations in 2025. Key departures on the offensive side of things: quarterback Grant Wilson is off to Indiana. Running back Aaron Young is out of eligibility. Leading wide receiver Isaiah Page is out of eligibility. Wide receiver Kelby Williams is off to Western Kentucky. Tight end Pat Conroy is out of eligibility. And offensive lineman Michael Flores is off to Louisville. On the defensive side of things, they lose edge Amori Morrison to UAB. Edge Jalen White McLean to Cincinnati. Defensive tackle Denzel Lowry to Louisville. Safety Will Jones II, North Texas. Safety Ashton Whitner to Ball State. And safety Jerron Manning to Mississippi State. I think on offense, the biggest losses are Aaron Young, but I think the biggest loss is tight end Pat Conroy. He was a safety blanket for Colton Joseph last year. So they're going to need someone to kind of – and Isaiah Page, right? Isaiah Page was a slot receiver. Losing those 2 guys, that's huge. They're going to – I think those are the 2 biggest losses on offense. Defense, I'd say defensive line. Losing Jerron Manning's huge. Jerron Manning, one of the best safeties in all the G5. He's off the SEC now. I feel like this staff has to rebuild the defensive backfield every year. They at least have the last couple of years, and I have faith that they'll be able to do that again in 2025. To me, the bigger concern on defense is the defensive line, losing Morrison, Jalen White, McClain, and Denzel Lowry. I know the staff's excited by some guys that are returned, but I think those 3 losses, could be the biggest losses on defense, or the ones that concern me the most for the defense as we head into 2025.
What does surprise me though, you got Grant Wilson transferring up to Indiana, and he didn't play.
Yeah, he got injured, right? He was Grant Wilson was the starting quarterback.
He didn't play particularly well.
Yeah, he didn't. I think him going to Indiana was a move by Curt Cignetti, kind of a mind game move, to learn a little bit about their first opponent. Obviously, Grant Wilson is very familiar with Kevin Decker. He came over from Fordham with Kevin Decker, knows the offense very, very well, and so I have no doubt that Indiana bringing Wilson over was a big part of getting that knowledge for their Week 1 game versus Old Dominion for Indiana. So some gamesmanship there by Curt Cignetti. Key additions on the offensive side of things: they bring in tight end Dawson Johnson from Florida, offensive tackle Griffin Dugan from Virginia Tech, offensive lineman Ryan Joyce from Fordham. On the defensive side of things, they bring in safety Nikendre Steiger from Kansas State, cornerback Botros Alessandro from Purdue, and cornerback Ronald Jackson Jr. from Montana. Again, we don't talk about freshmen, and we do the transfer portal. We also don't talk about JUCO players because they're technically part of a recruiting class from a signing perspective. They sign just like freshmen do. So I don't have all the wide receivers, JUCO wide receivers that ODU brings in. I believe there's 4 of them to kind of rebuild that wide receiver room. And they also brought in a JUCO tight end who will not be here for the spring, and they just recently signed him. He'll be here after May. Shocking to me, or not shocking to me, but a little bit surprising given some of the other past transfer portal additions. But Ricky Ronnie has said that he believes cornerback Botros Alessandro is the best transfer portal addition ever at Old Dominion, and that's pretty high praise considering Zach Kuntz, tight end, came over via the transfer portal from Penn State, had an outstanding year there at Old Dominion before going off the NFL and the New York Jets. So that's pretty high praise there for Alessandro at cornerback. I'm really excited about the wide receivers, the JUCO wide receivers. We'll see who kind of stands out in spring camp. There's certainly opportunities at wide receiver and tight end for some folks to step up. Look at their schedule. Out of conference schedules, not very easy. They start week 1, Indiana. Then they get North Carolina Central. Then they play at Virginia Tech and then Liberty. And so, I don't know. It feels like you're hoping they go 2-2, right? I mean, maybe they can beat Virginia Tech or Indiana, but both those games on the road, that's not highly likely. And Virginia Tech, we've beaten Virginia Tech, but never beaten them at Blacksburg. We've only beaten them at home. So yeah, tough out of conference schedule. You're hoping you go 2-2 there, and then you get into the Sun Belt, and you gotta. I think for Ronnie's sake, he's got to scratch another 5 wins or so, have 7 wins, go to a bowl game, get a bowl game win, and get to 8 wins. It's a little bit of an uphill battle, but I mean, you return quarterback Colton Joseph, had a breakout year a year ago. You get Jason Henderson, All-American linebacker, back, who sat out all of the 2024 season, other than the first game against South Carolina. And I think expectations are high for Old Dominion. I think deservedly so, given bringing back Joseph and Henderson, two key pieces on offense and defense in 2025. So I don't know, like I don't want to get too overly excited, but like I feel like they have a great shot at winning the Sun Belt East. If it doesn't happen with what they have, there's still some question marks. Like I said, wide receiver, tight end, two big ones.
And honestly, the thing too is you've got Colton Joseph there. If he plays well and helps, will he be coming back, or will he look to transfer out?
Yeah, I think either way, Colton Joseph's probably gone, right? Because I think
if he play up to par, then
if he has the season that's expected, right, he's going to have a great season, and he's probably going to parlay that into a transfer portal into the P4. If on the flip side, if Ricky Ronnie's fired, it probably means Colton Joseph didn't have a very good season, and he's probably going to decide to move on as well. So I think either way, I think it's not likely that Colton returns in 2026, but I'm hoping he has an outstanding season, and he's the Sun Belt's Offensive Player of the Year at Old Dominion, the Sun Belt champ. That's my hope. We'll see. They start spring practice this week, actually, on Thursday. So,
all right. Well, enjoy your time there, looking at spring practice with your media credentials. Let's move on to South Alabama Jaguars, 7-6 last season. A bit of an up and down year. Coaching changes. We have a new OC. Paul Petrino will be in his first season in 2024. He was South Alabama's wide receiver coach. Prior to that, in 2022 and 2023, he was Central Michigan's OC. And 2013 through 2021, he was Idaho's head coach. The head coach for South Alabama is Major Applewhite going into his second season, and DC Will Windham is in his second season. Justice, who's leaving?
All right. Key departures for the South Alabama Jaguars on offense. Stud freshman running back Fluff Bothwell off to Mississippi State. Running back Braylon McReynolds off to UL Monroe. Wide receiver Jamal Pritchett off to the NFL. Offensive tackle Jaden Hobson is off to Alabama. On the defensive side of things, defensive tackle Wakevius Thomas out of eligibility. Cornerback Jordan Buchanan off to UNLV. Star freshman cornerback Amarian Fortenberry off to Kansas State. Cornerback Jordan Scruggs off to West Virginia. And safety Jaden Vosen out of eligibility. Some really big losses for them, right? I mean, losing both those running backs. They do return Kentrell Bullock, which helps. And then Jamal Pritchett, man, like their leader, their star wide receiver from a year ago is gone. They do return wide receiver Devin Vosen for another year. Mm-hmm. And then, losing Devin's twin brother, Jaden, there at safety. Jaden, one of the best safeties in all of college football. That's a big loss for the defense. Obviously, Gio Lopez returns. I think expectations are high. I think for South Alabama, right? I think they should be one of the better teams in the Sun Belt West, and maybe they're the favorite for the Sun Belt West. Again, they had trouble keeping Gio Lopez healthy last year, right? So that's key number one is
he had that turf toe pretty early.
Injury. Yeah.
Hampered him like all season. You unlock him and he's running around. He'll be a tough quarterback to bring down. And
yeah, I think that'll be a key for them in the 2025 season, keeping him healthy. Key additions on offense. They bring in offensive lineman Amori Wiggins from Arkansas. On the defensive side of the ball, they bring in linebacker Caleb Dozier from Georgia Tech. Safety Anthony Brown from Purdue. Safety Taiwan Ray Jr. from Oklahoma State. And safety Dallas Young coming over from Arkansas. Again, like I said, I think South Alabama's got to be one of the favorites for the Sun Belt West, if not the favorite. Just returning Gio Lopez and Kentrell Bullock. They'll need someone to step up a receiver along with Devin Vosen, and maybe they move Devin Vosen back into the slot where Jamal Pritchett was. We'll see, or someone steps up here in the spring. The defense has got to play better, I think, if they want to win the Sun Belt, have shot the Sun Belt championship. But I certainly think the offense is going to be, lights out once again, provided they can keep Gio Lopez healthy. Their out of conference schedule, not too bad. They play Morgan State, Tulane, Auburn, and North Texas, with really only Auburn being the perceived for sure loss.
Those will be two really good games there with Tulane and North Texas. Yeah,
those should be two good games. Tulane kind of rebuilding. North Texas, that North Texas South Alabama game. I don't, it's way early now, but like right now, I'd say hit the over. That looks like a potential for a lot of offense. But and then coming over from the Sun Belt East, they get Coastal Carolina and Georgia State. So somewhat favorable there. They Coastal Carolina in a down year. So I mean, South Alabama, the schedule kind of lines up where I think they might be the favorite in the Sun Belt West, especially if that defense can improve in 2025.
Well, let's talk about the next team that's looking to improve in 2025, and that's the Southern Miss Golden Eagles, who are 1-11, and they're like, you know what? Let's bring over all of Marshall. We've got new coaching. We've got a new head coach, OC and DC. Charles Huff will be in his first season. He was Marshall's head coach 2021 through 2024. Defensive coordinator Jason Seymour will be in his first season. He was the DC at Marshall in 2023 and 2024. In 2022, he was the linebacker coach at Georgia Tech. In 2021, Valdosta State DC, that was a D2 school. In 2019 through 2020, he was a defensive analyst at Georgia Tech. And then the interesting hire is OC Blake Anderson, who will be in his first season. In 2014 through 2020, Arkansas State's head coach. 2021 through 2023, he was Utah State's head coach. And last year, he was not in the business as he was fired at Utah State just prior to the season. I don't know, a week, 2 weeks before the season started. Really late there in the season, which, again, Blake Anderson and Charles Huff are two different play call, want to do two different things, whether it's run the ball or pass the ball. And I'm going to lean in the side of you don't bring in a Blake Anderson type if you're not going to do Blake Anderson type of throwing. Charles Huff is going to want to run the ball and whatnot, but I'm going to go with this is going to be a pass first type offense, or at least pass quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think, Charles Huff last year, I think what we saw from that offense was really more of what I would think, of a Seth Doege influence, more so than Charles Huff influence. And I think we'll see the same thing here with Blake Anderson. This offense being much more influenced by Blake Anderson and what he wants to do versus what Charles Huff typically does on offense. Key departures for the Southern Miss Golden Eagles on offense: quarterback Tate Rodemaker in the transfer portal, running back Rodriguez Clark is out of eligibility, and running back Kenyon Clay is off to Arkansas State. On the defensive side of things, defensive lineman Jalil Clemens out of eligibility, safety Michael Caraway Jr. off to Florida, and cornerback Will James goes over to Houston. One quick note, I saw a quote today from freshman linebacker Chris Jones in spring practice, and just talking about, I don't know, it's kind of like a not so good quote for the past coaching staff, but he basically said two things, and I'm paraphrasing what was said, but one was I'm really learning how to play defense now. And number two thing was I have to be more disciplined, and than I had to under the old staff. So obviously, with the new coaching staff, there's new things and new expectations. Maybe a higher degree of accountability under this new staff, based on one player's comments. Key additions. Again, a lot of this is going to be coming over from Marshall. On the offensive side of things, they bring in quarterback Braylon Braxton from Marshall, running back Robert Briggs Jr. from Utah State. So you're going to see a lot of Utah State and Marshall, right? Because that's where Blake Anderson and obviously Charles Huff come from. Running back Matt Jones from Ole Miss, running back Jeffrey Pittman, Mississippi State, wide receiver Tyshawn Chapman, Marshall, wide receiver Elijah Metcalf, Marshall, wide receiver Braylon Brown, Marshall, wide receiver Chuck Montgomery, Marshall, wide receiver Micah Davis, Ole Miss. Before Ole Miss, he was at Utah State. Wide receiver Grant Page, Utah State. Offensive tackle Aaron Parks from South Carolina. On the defensive side of things, edge Jamon Tapp from Arizona State, edge J.J. Hawkins, Marshall, cornerback Josh Moten, Marshall, cornerback Jonathan Penix, Virginia Tech, and safety Corey Myrick, Marshall. I think the interesting thing is going to be see how the wide receiver room plays out, right? Because you got so many Marshall guys and so many Utah State guys. So it'll be real interesting to kind of see how that plays out. The one thing I'll say is probably positive for at least Elijah Metcalf. I think both Grant Page and Micah Davis were outside receivers for Blake Anderson, whereas Elijah Metcalf is a slot guy. So maybe if there's one name to kind of potentially say, well, he's probably for sure a starter, maybe that's Elijah Metcalf, right? Since he's a slot guy, whereas I believe all the other receivers are all outside receivers.
And he had a great season. Was that Middle Tennessee State? Is that where he?
Yeah, before he came to Marshall at Middle Tennessee.
Yeah. So,
looking at the Southern Miss out of conference schedule, they got Mississippi State, Jackson State, Louisiana Tech, and Jacksonville State. Outside the Mississippi State game, not an overly tough schedule. From the Sun Belt East, they get App State and Georgia Southern. It's going to be interesting to kind of see, I think, what happens here in year one. I could see the gamut. What I don't see is them having as poor of a season as they did in 2024. They're definitely going to be better than that. But a new place for a lot of the players. There's some familiarity there with the Marshall coaches, obviously with Utah State as well. It'd be interesting. It's just going to be really interesting to kind of see how it all molds together, and if they're able to seriously turn things around in year one. But I think, at least on offense, the pieces are there to potentially do that if they gel. And so, if you told me Southern Miss was at least competing or even maybe winning the Sun Belt West, I don't think it'd be a complete shock to me. I think the only thing that would shock me is if the season is as bad in 2025 as it was in 2024.
I think this team will just start on the back of Braylon Braxton and just kind of adapt from there. Like, hey, we're trying to, get our feet wet. We're going to run the ball. Braylon Braxton's going to be a big part of that. Throw what we can throw here and there, and then look to build on that. And
Braylon Braxton was outstanding towards the end of the year. Probably best quarterback in the Sun Belt, I would say, or one of the top best quarterbacks.
I think they'll look to rely heavily on Braylon Braxton here in 2025. All right. Another team here in 2025 that looks to have a bounce back season would be Texas State Bobcats, 8-5. I say bounce back because they had high expectations, and I don't.
Yeah, they were talking about being the college football playoff representative a year ago, and they didn't. They were never really, I think, in my opinion, in contention to win the Sun Belt West. So yeah, high expectations that did not get realized.
Yeah, and it's like 8-5. We were on here earlier, and App State News is talking about like, hey, you get 8 wins, like that's going to be a success for App State. I know we're in different situations, but like that was a down year for Texas State. So
It felt like a down year.
Yeah. Coaching changes. We got a new OC. We got Landon Kiopel will be in his first season, 2023 and 2024. He was the wide receiver coach at Texas State. 2022, Incarnate Ward, offensive analyst. Ooh, Incarnate Ward. Everyone loves the Incarnate Ward tree there. 2021, he was the chief of staff and director of football operations and director of recruiting for Hawaii. And then 2020, he was a senior offensive analyst at Hawaii. Now he head coach GJ Kenny will be in his third season. And then we've got 2 defensive coordinators. You got DC Dexter McCoy will be in his second season. And he didn't have a co next to his. But then the other guy, Bradley Dale Pivetto, will be in his second season. He has the co-DC. So you'd think Dexter is the one, heading up that defense with Bradley kind of learning a little bit behind him.
And you got to assume that GJ Kinney's probably might be a little bit more involved in the offense than he was a year ago with a new OC there.
Yep.
All right, let's look at personnel for the Texas State Bobcats. Key departures on offense: quarterback Jordan McLeod out of eligibility, quarterback PJ Hatter off at Georgia State, quarterback RJ Martinez in the transfer portal, running back and friend of the show Ismail Mahdi is off to Arizona, wide receiver Joey Hobart out of eligibility, wide receiver Jaden Williams out of eligibility, wide receiver Cole Wilson out is over to Baylor, offensive tackle Alex Harkey off to Oregon, offensive tackle Jameto Obigbo off to Arizona State. On the defensive side of things, defensive end Ben Bell off to Virginia Tech, defensive lineman Dominic Ratcliffe to Indiana, defensive lineman Terry Webb to SMU, defensive tackle Tavian Coleman, Colorado, linebacker James Neal out of eligibility, linebacker Max Harris off to Arizona, and cornerback Joshua Eaton off to Michigan State. Man, they lose pretty much every quarterback on the roster except for Brad Jackson, and they got a lot of replacements to do at the wide receiver position. But I tell you, the thing that concerns me the most is all those losses on the defensive line. Not necessarily Ben Bell. Ben Bell only played, 3 games a year ago. But the rest of that defensive line, they're going to have to totally rebuild. And that was one of the better defensive lines in the Sun Belt. And so that's going to be a tall order to totally rebuild that defensive line. That concerns me more than them having to rebuild offense at quarterback and wide receiver. I think DJ Kinney will be able to do that, but those defensive line losses really concern me heading into 2025. Key additions in the transfer portal on offense: they bring in quarterback Giovanni McCoy from Oregon State, quarterback Nate Yarnell from Pittsburgh, quarterback Holden Garner from Auburn, running back Greg Burrell from UNLV, wide receiver Tyron Smith from Cincinnati, wide receiver Shamar Kirk from Miami. On the defensive side of things, they bring in edge Kennard Snyder from Iowa State, defensive lineman Michael Nwokochu from Syracuse, linebacker Chance Johnson from Texas A&M, and cornerback Kamari Terrell from Oregon. I read a recent article before spring, and I forget who it was from, and they were talking about the quarterback position. And the thing that struck me as odd, they talked about it being a true battle, but they never mentioned Brad Jackson, who's the only returning quarterback. And I just thought that was, very strange and odd. Now, again, Jackson was known more for his legs at the time he played last year. Maybe they felt the feeling is like the staff wants a better passer. But I just thought it was odd that, of all, they mentioned all the transfer guys in this battle and not once mentioned the one guy that returns in Brad Jackson.
I know in the bowl game, they were hoping to get Brad Jackson in the game, but they were going to win it. So they weren't going to just sit McLeod in the second half or anything. Like, they wanted to win the game, but they were hoping to get him in there in the second half, and they never got that chance. Honestly, like, I kind of like Giovanni McCoy. I think he was the quarterback that came from Idaho that then went to Oregon State.
Yeah.
And played pretty well. So I like his chances in that offense. And I really like Greg Burrell. I thought he was a very talented freshman at UNLV last year, and I'm kind of excited to see what he can do here at Texas State.
Kennard Schneider, that excites me on defense. He was at, I believe, UL Monroe before going to Iowa State a year ago. Had a very productive season at UL Monroe. Now he's back in the Sun Belt, so I'm sure he's trying to rekindle some of that magic he had before he left and went to Iowa State. So maybe he can be one of the answers there along the defensive line. Looking at their out of conference schedule, very manageable. Eastern Michigan, UTSA, Arizona State, and Nichols. Obviously, Arizona State's probably a loss. But the game I'm looking forward to, that UTSA game, that's another game, man, where, like, fire up the overs because UTSA, I think returns a lot on offense. They lost a lot on defense. Again, that looks like sitting here in the middle of March, that looks like a very high scoring and fun game for the Bobcats and UTSA.
If you're going to give McCowan a lot of time to throw and not be able to give him a pass rush, that will be, throw lots of points.
And, as far as I think, Texas State, they expect to be one of the top teams in the Sun Belt West and perhaps competing for, a championship. I'm a little less excited about them this year than I was last year, given all the losses. But, maybe, last year we were really high on them, and they did not meet expectations. And maybe this year we won't be as high and they'll exceed expectations. But nonetheless, I expect, a high scoring offense out of TJ Kinney here in 2025.
Well, let's move over to another team that maybe their expectation, they hit a little bit lower than they had in previous, but we had a new coaching, we had new coaches last year, but that is Troy Trojans, 4-8 last season. No coaching changes this year. Jared Parker will be the head coach going into his second season. OC Seth Ragin will be in his second season. DC Dante Wright and co-DC Nathan Burton will also be in their second season. Who's leaving here, Justice?
Key departures for the Troy Trojans on offense. Running back Gerald Green is out of eligibility. Wide receiver, breakout player last year, Devontae Ross off to Penn State. Offensive tackle Daniel King, North Carolina. And offensive lineman Boaz Stanley to South Carolina. On the defensive side of things, the probably the biggest loss is defensive end or edge Raymond Cutts. It's out of eligibility. Man, that Devontae Ross loss is huge, right? He was such a big piece of their offense in 2024. It's going to be hard to replace him in his production in 2025. Key additions for the Troy Trojans on offense, they bring in running back Jamontez Woods from West Florida, offensive lineman Bison Lang from Tennessee, offensive tackle Patrick Screws Jr. from Georgia Tech. On the defensive side of things, they bring in edge Elijah Davis from South Carolina, safety David Daniel Sisavana from Georgia, and cornerback Galeno Levine from Missouri State. Maybe my memory is really bad, but this is the second time Jamontez Woods is at Troy. Was he at Troy and then he left? They went to West Florida and then came back?
I don't recall. I'll look that up while
but I feel like he was somewhere in the FBS before West Florida. Maybe it wasn't Troy. Hopefully they get back Goose Crowder, right? Goose Crowder was their starting quarterback to begin the year. Had some injuries, didn't come back. Maybe they'll get back a healthy Goose Crowder. They return running back Damian Taylor, who really kind of came on strong there the back half of the season, along with Gerald Green. They both had strong second halves of the year. With Green gone, look for Damian Taylor to kind of lead that running back room. Looking at their schedule, out of conference, they got Nichols, Clemson, Memphis, and Buffalo. Not an easy schedule there. You got one for sure win, and you got definitely one for sure loss at Clemson. Buffalo's pretty good. Memphis to be determined. You can see them out of conference going anywhere from 1-3 to 3-1. Coming over from the Sun Belt East, they play Old Dominion and Georgia State. And then they have the rest of the Sun Belt West. I feel like if this team can get to 6 wins for sure, it feels like a success in year 2 under Parker. Again, I think they started to kind of like find themselves the second half of the season. They started running the ball more and getting more out of the running game between Green and Taylor, and then of course throwing to Devontae Ross. I think for the offense, again, a healthy Goose Crowder, and then finding that who that wide receiver is that's going to step up to replace the production from Devontae Ross are probably the key things for this team to have a successful year and go to a bowl game in 2025.
So looking at Montez Woods, so he committed to Troy in 2018, signed, and then went to the portal in 2013, went to West Florida.
2023, you mean?
Yeah, sorry. Yep, and then has come back.
So yeah, I was correct.
So
I thought it sounded familiar. He was at Troy, left, and now he's back at Troy.
So it's Troy 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. So he has 621 yards rushing and 132 attempts, and appeared in 39 games in his time there at Troy. But you know what? We've just almost made it through this grueling Sun Belt conferences. It'll be a dogfight in every single game. But we've got one more team to talk about here, and that is the UL Monroe Warhawks, who were 5-7 last season. Coaching changes, we have none. Head coach Brian Vincent will be in his second season, assuming he is also going to be calling plays. DC Ernest Hill will be in his second season. We've got an unfortunate guy who's leaving the team. Justice, talk to us about the guys leaving.
Yeah, the key losses for the Warhawks on offense. Outstanding freshman, our freshman of the year in the G5, Ahmad Hardy is off to Missouri. Offensive lineman Carter Miller off to Central Florida. And on the defensive side, they lose defensive back Trevor Randall, who is in the transfer portal. Key additions for the Warhawks on offense. They bring in running back Antonio Martin Jr., Sacramento State. Before that, I believe he's at Georgia Tech. They also bring in running back Braylon McReynolds from South Alabama, wide receiver Nick Trujillo from New Mexico State, offensive lineman Antavius Woody from UAB. On the defensive side of things, they bring in linebacker Marcus Ross from Mississippi State and safety Tavion Combs from New Mexico State. And you saw what Ahmad Hardy did, right? And they certainly did for UL Monroe last year. Was a workhorse. He was their offense. He was the feature of their offense. He was featured in the offense. So they parlayed that into getting Antonio Martin Jr. and Braylon McReynolds. And then also a recruit. We haven't, like I said, we don't generally talk about freshmen in this series, but I did want to mention running back Deshaun Ford, because what I distinctly remember in the recruitment of Deshaun Ford was like the Ahmad Hardy pitch was what sold him. You know, Coach Vincent said, "Hey, come here. you can be the next Ahmad Hardy, come here, show out for a year, and you too can go off to the SEC. So they definitely use that recruiting pitch to get to Sean Ford, and I'm assuming they use that same pitch and enticement to get Antonio Martin Jr. as well as Braylon McReynolds. So I think it's no secret what they want to do on offense. That's going to be run, and run some more. Kind of what I think what really failed them last year was the defense. The defense started off pretty strong. They were, I think, they were 5-0 or 5-0 in conference play, and then it just kind of fell off a cliff, and the defensive play fell off a cliff. And so, I think that's what we can expect to see from UL Monroe is run, and play great defense. I think that the key will be, can the defense hold up this year to kind of get them over the hump and get to a potential bowl game in 2025.
All right. You got a schedule there for?
Yeah, let's look at it. I do. Out of conference schedule for UL Monroe Warhawks, St. Francis, Alabama, UTEP, and Northwestern. Obviously, Alabama, Northwestern, 2 tough games. UTEP's probably 50-50. And then, a win there at St. Francis. Coming over from the East, they get Coastal Carolina, which is a winnable game, and Old Dominion as well. And then the rest of the Sun Belt West. I think this team is going to go as far as the defense carries them. That's kind of how it went last year. That's what I expect this year. They're going to run the heck out of the ball and hope their defense can hold you down. And that's a challenge, I think, is in the Sun Belt West, given, the Texas States, the South Alabamas, where they have those Arkansas State have those really explosive offenses. So, the defense will be the key to the UL Monroe Warhawks season in 2025.
All right, we did it. We made it through the grueling Sun Belt, Fun Belt.
The only conference with divisions.
Yeah,
so they the only FBS conference that still has division. They still have a West and an East, and by all accounts, that's not going anywhere. That's something that they plan to keep and continue. Now we'll see. There's been talk about Texas State possibly moving to the Pac-12. Those rumors seem to continue to pop up every now and then. We'll see if there's any smoke there, and then if there is, what the Sun Belt decides to do in terms of replacing Texas State. Be interesting to see.
So this is the part where I would normally say come back and join us, next week. But next week we're going to take it off.
Spring break.
Spring break. I'm going to be taking.
Luke's going to be in Disney, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be in Disney over in Orlando, in Legoland. So taking a little break. So come back and join us. We'll be back live with you on March 31st, where we're going to bring you up to date on all the latest news and happenings in the world of G5 college football right around that 10:30 p.m. Eastern, as we will be discussing some of these coaching changes and doing a deep dive in some of these interesting coaches changes. I don't know how many
what to expect for the offenses, like what we think the offenses might look like.
Yeah, and we won't cover all of them because between offense and just between offensive coordinators and head coaches, I think there's 51 or 55 changes. There was a lot over G5. I don't think that's including defensive coordinators. I think I just kept it to offense. But defense, there'd be even more. There's a lot that gets changed every year in the G5. But we'll take a look at some of the more intriguing ones that interest us or whatnot. But if you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button on X. Give us a follow. And if you're listening to us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please subscribe and leave those 5-star ratings. Thank you all for your support. Until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.